And we got this through Kathy Nelson to meet with Don and Jerry about this film, Dangerous Minds, and if we wanted to collaborate with Mark on the score. And we were like, well, hello, opportunity knocks. And we took it. And we met with Mark, and Mark, after like 3 days of the three of us being in the studio, just looked at us and went, you guys, just take it. I'm going to bow out of this one. You guys take it. And we got handed this film. And that started our career.
You're listening to Music Dialogue. Hear the stories behind iconic theme songs, scores, and jingles directly from the composers and music supervisors who made them happen. In this episode, Emmy Award-winning composers Wendy and Lisa tell the story about how they landed their first film as composers on the 1995 movie Dangerous Minds. They also talk about their work on Heroes, Nurse Jackie, and the new series Firefly Lane on Netflix.
Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy.
And this is Lisa over here. Well, I guess you could say it all started in our childhood. We both grew up in musical families. Both of our fathers were studio musicians. So we were always around music, and our dads would take us to sessions and things like that. So we got to see the workings of the studio. And for me, some of those sessions were for TV and movie calls that my dad would do. And so I got to see how they did scoring, with streamers. And that was kind of the old time way of getting your music in sync, was that you just draw on the film. And when the streamer would cross the screen, your music was supposed to start any second now. And that's how you got in sync with things. Like now you just use computers and type in the frame and the time code, and you can get right exactly on a cut. And I don't think people realize the skill that goes into just hitting a cut in a film or on a TV show. But a lot goes into it. But anyway, not to carry on about streamers. So we grew up in musical families. I had bands and stuff growing up. And then, of course, when I was 19, I got a great opportunity and went on the road with Prince in his band. And that lasted for about 10 years. And it was after that that we really got into scoring. But I'll just wait for a moment to get into that. And Wendy, you can talk a little bit about your childhood.
Sure. So Lisa's correct that we both grew up in musical families, and both of our fathers were what was called first call musicians back in the 60s and 70s for, a wide range of sessions, well, either at film sessions or TV sessions or recording dates. And we did get experience watching our fathers playing in big orchestra dates. I remember going to see my father being a first chair piano player in a Jerry Goldsmith session for one of his films back in the 70s, or it might have been a TV thing Jerry was doing before he was even doing film. So we saw a lot of that stuff. So we were very, very comfortable when it came time for us to transition from being just musicians in the rock world or the pop world to transitioning into something that we had passions about long before we were doing that. So it fit like a glove transitioning to composing for film and TV, because we started out very early as lovers of stories and narratives and studying all the greats before us, including Nino Rota and Bernard Herrmann, and like I said before, Jerry Goldsmith. And we've been really lucky in making this transition, especially being women as well. It's been much easier, or accepted, not easier. It has been widely accepted for maybe 20 years now that musicians transition into film and TV composing, but mostly, of the male gender. And so the two of us transitioning, yes, it fit very well for us to do so, but it's been a tough climb to be taken seriously and be respected. And, it's a daily grind, but it's well worth it. And especially when you get a really great project that you are passionate about, and that the story is so good and the filmmaking is so good that music is just icing on the cake. When it becomes more of a chore is when either one of those things are weak or not so good. And then they ask the musician to pull a rabbit out of their hat and fix a scene that was either not covered well or directed badly or written badly or edited badly, or they didn't get enough coverage for this. And, can you make it seem like we had enough coverage for this by imposing emotion where it would not normally have been? And that's when it becomes like a tough job, but there's still gold nuggets in that as well. But it's much more satisfying to get a piece of narrative or actual finished production that's phenomenal, and you get to compose music to it. There's nothing quite like it.
Do you remember one of your early projects that you both did as composers once you made that transition?
Yeah, I mean, the first project that Lisa and I did was a film in the 90s called Dangerous Minds. And it was a film that starred Michelle Pfeiffer, and it was produced by the mega production team, Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. Jerry went on to produce massive blockbusters, and Don passed away sooner than everyone expected. But we did a film for the two of those guys because Mark Isham was hired to compose the film, which he had scored a couple times. And Lisa and I were massive fans of Mark's. Even before he was composing films, we were, I dare say I'm an unapologetic ECM Records fan. And Mark was signed to that label, and I loved listening to his records. And
yeah.
So, getting a chance for the two of us to meet with Mark, because he was hired to do this film, Dangerous Minds, and John and Jerry weren't quite happy with what Mark was delivering, which frankly, in the spirit of full disclosure, was nonsense, because it doesn't matter what Mark delivers, it's good. But they felt that it was missing a certain je ne sais quoi. And we somehow, I don't remember how our name got into the hat, I know what it was. There was a really powerful music supervisor and head of music named Kathy Nelson back in the day, who had done a project for a producer that Lisa and I were working with, Trevor Horn, and we did this song for a Barry Levinson film called Toys. And that was our in to meeting with agents and getting meetings for films. And we got this through Kathy Nelson to meet with Don and Jerry about this film, Dangerous Minds, and if we wanted to collaborate with Mark on the score. And we were like, well, hello, opportunity knocks. And we took it, and we met with Mark, and Mark, after like 3 days of the three of us being in the studio, just looked at us and went, you guys just take it. I'm going to bow out of this one. You guys take it. And we got handed this film, and that started our career.
In 2006, you scored the hit NBC show Heroes. Can you talk about, getting hired on that show and what it was like scoring it? I think you also created the theme for it, which I went and rewatched it. That was a show that I watched. I was a big fan of that show, and the theme, definitely, I remembered it once I saw it again.
Right. We had a relationship with one of the producers. Oh God, I guess it was it was very, very early 90s. And we got hired to do 6 seasons of a show called Crossing Jordan for NBC. And the producer and one of the directors was a man by the name of Alan Arkish, he's been in the business forever. And he called me and Lisa while we were in New Zealand doing a Neil Finn record and asked if we'd be interested in, scoring a TV show for him. And we were like, huh? What? But we did. And the person who was the creator of that show was the man, Tim Kring, who went on to create shows such as Heroes and other great blockbusters. And we did Crossing Jordan for 6 seasons and developed a really strong relationship with both Tim and Alan. And that was a natural progression for the two of us. We met with Tim about Heroes before it had been even filmed. We met at a restaurant and he told us about this idea he had for this show called Heroes and asked Lisa and I to put our thinking caps on as to where we could go musically with this, because he wanted to do something very different with it for a network show. And Lisa and I were, chomping at the bit to get our hands on something that didn't sound like typical network TV. So, that's how we got onto that gig. Lisa, did I recall that story well?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Heroes was really one of the greatest projects we worked on. I still think fondly about those years working on Heroes because we did have such a great relationship with Tim and Alan. And early on, when we were working on the pilot, we kind of stumbled on how to approach the show. And we decided to be totally counterintuitive. And there was this one scene in the pilot where the cheerleader, one of the stars, rushes into a burning train, and there's this big accident and fire, and and it's like an action scene where usually your instinct would tell you to do fast drums and action. You'd expect an action cue there, but what we ended up doing was more of a hypnotic, sort of tranquil cue with Shankar's voice. Shankar is a story of its own right. He's a musician and a singer. He's got this beautiful voice that we used throughout the score, and that was just a beautiful thing. But so with this cue, it helped us discover how to score the show, and it made it way more interesting. And they pretty much left us alone. I mean, if you work in television, you know that they don't really leave you alone.
No, it's a committee.
There are a lot of people with a lot of opinions, and it's sort of like the restaurant business. The customer is always right, and if they want, a low sodium meal that tastes salty, then that's what you have to give them. And a lot of times you're
that's funny. That's very funny. Yeah, sure.
So, but Heroes was not like that. It was pretty much, you guys know the philosophy here, so just go and do it. And so we were free to do a lot of stuff, and a lot of the stuff we did was just beautiful with the help of Shankar.
So in 2010, you won a Primetime Emmy for your main title theme for the show Nurse Jackie. Can you tell me about the process of creating this theme? And, obviously you got recognition for it being successful, and I guess how you make a main title theme successful for a show.
The way you make a main title sequence successful is get in early with the people who are doing the title cards and designing it. Because if you can have a dialogue with them as the composer and go step by step with each rough cut they have or idea, then you can shape a piece of music that works perfectly with those visuals. And we got in very, very early with the title company on Nurse Jackie and discussed way beforehand where it needed to go and what they wanted to do. And they wanted to tell the story of the main character, played by Edie Falco, in this 60-second title sequence. They wanted you to know she was a nurse, that she was married, that she was divorced, that she could have affairs, that she was a drug addict, that she wasn't, that she was Florence Nightingale. All of these things needed to be hit in a main title sequence. So, and growing up with a father who played on all of those sessions and being a fan of TV, even as a kid, listening to title sequences was an art form. I mean, you knew your show based on your title sequence, and there has been incredible title sequences, but that art form sort of disappeared for a very bizarre amount of time, which it's still kind of not around now, except if you're like HBO or, you know, doing these big blockbuster title card sequences, which end up being, you know, like Game of Thrones or The Gambit or The Crown. They're like these huge productions, and they need something very special to give you kind of the tone of what the show is. But for the most part, most networks nowadays only give you 5 seconds to say something, and then the rest of the opening, the first act of the show is just there so they can put credits during that opening sequence. So you have to come up with some kind of sound that will define your show, which is a tall order, which we did quite well with, obviously, Heroes, because we used Shankar's voice to be the defining, the kind of piece de resistance of the overarching idea, tone, sound of that show. On Nurse Jackie, you know, we got a full minute to kind of say what we wanted to say. On our main title sequence for Touch, which was for Fox, which we got a minute to kind of create the sound of the entire season based on that main title sequence. On the HBO show Carnival that we did the title sequence to, that became sort of the tone of what the score for the rest of the couple seasons that it was on sounded like. So if you can get in early enough with your writers, your producers for TV, that's TV, and get in early enough with your title card people and the designers, you're going to come up with something that's going to actually last throughout your entire season of your show.
Yeah, collaboration is really a good thing when it comes to a main title. And like one of the things that we did on Nurse Jackie was the first shot is her like opening a medicine cabinet, and we used bottles of pills for a shaker sound. So like the visuals informed the music in funny ways, you know, that you don't expect. Sure. But collaboration is really key. At least we've found that the best titles we've done have been because of a good collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you scored the new Netflix show Firefly Lane. It's guitar and piano driven with really beautiful textures. Can you talk about your approach to the score and your experience working on the show?
Sure. That show's showrunner and creator is a woman by the name of Maggie Friedman, and we had done a couple shows for her. One was called The Witches of East End, which we did 2 seasons of with her, and the other one was a show on the CW called No Tomorrow, which did it last 1 or 2 seasons, Lisa? I'm spacing.
No, it was just really 1 season.
Yeah. But Maggie was the showrunner and the creator of those shows. So she called us and told us about this idea that she had for a show called Firefly Lane that was literally employed by mostly women. So when we met to begin with on it, it was like a room full of these really powerful women, producers and writers and directors that were all masterminding this new show called Firefly Lane. And so working with Maggie and having her trust in the two of us to move forward on this project felt really bolstering to what Lisa and I could do for the show. What the interesting part about Firefly Lane is that we got maybe 4 or 5 episodes in before the pandemic hit, or maybe even less than that. And then the pandemic hit and all the studios closed down. Our studio closed down because there wasn't enough protocols for PPE or for protecting yourselves from the virus at the time. So we all went to our own homes. So most of it was, an experiment. But I think we did a really good job. We both had our laptops and we were, recording on, whatever we had lying around the house, microphones and, audio MIDI setups, and sending our WAV files back and forth to each other and dropping them in sessions and, working off each other's sessions until we completed a cue. And then we'd upload it to our engineer who lives, miles and miles away. And he would go ahead and create our stems, and we'd keep going that way. And we got it done. But it was an experiment. It was an experiment. I mean, I'm glad to be back in the studio. I really wouldn't want to do that again, but I certainly know I can.
I wanted to just talk a little bit more about the score itself and Firefly Lane, that because it was a pretty fun project musically, because the show takes place over 3 different decades. And so we got to do music from the 80s and then the 90s and then the 2000s. And so that was really a good box, to work in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was fun to was it it was 70s, 80s, and 2000s.
That's it,
right? Yeah, I got it wrong. And like the 70s was really fun to do, using 70s sounds and 70s styles, I guess you'd say. And then 80s, of course, is very obvious, and synth and crazy guitars. And then 2000 was more orchestrated, when they were grown up, and yeah. So it was a really fun score to work on, and we've gotten a lot of great feedback from people watching the show. They really like the music, so I guess we tried harder or something because of the pandemic, and it really worked out.
I guess so.
So outside of the way that you were working during the pandemic, can you talk about how you work together in composing, and if there's certain areas of the process that one person focuses on more than the other?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. Depending on the project and the time, we have pretty defined roles in the room. We have 2 rooms that go sometimes at once. So I'll be working on a project, Lisa will be working on another project in 2 different rooms. But for the most part, if it's defined and it's a show that we've spent, let's say, for instance, Nurse Jackie. On that show, in the second room, we have a pretty large whisper room where the drums are set up with a monitor, and some of the amps are in there so we can turn things up and play loudly. And on Nurse Jackie, Lisa was in the main room with a monitor. We were both, for lack of a better way to describe this, we were both connected on the same Ethernet and the same Dante box, and were able to work off the same session at the same time with a picture at the same time. And I would be behind the drums, and Lisa would be behind the keyboard, and we would sketch each scene with those instruments. So we were kind of like a pit band to a black or to a silent movie. And that was an exciting way to record things. And so I would always think of myself more as the rhythm section, and Lisa was always the keyboard player. Mm-hmm. I was always covering bass, drums, and guitars and percussion stuff, and Lisa's always doing like the keyboard stuff, pianos and organs and Wurlitzers and Rhodes, and that was specific to that show. On things like we've done some actions, like a lot of action TV stuff, and so I kind of do better with harder edge sounds. And so Lisa will kind of I rely heavily on Lisa's like harmonic orchestral sense. I can do that stuff, but when we're working together as a duo, I rely on her heavily to cover that stuff. So I'll keep my eye and my intention focused on getting all the really hard sounds and percussive sounds and the bass frequencies and, the harder edge narrative parts of the stories really fall really well into my lap. And Lisa plays much better when we're working together with the really subconscious, tormented parts of the narrative. If that makes sense, that's that's how that's how we play well together with a narrative. It's really well defined, but it's also fluid. So we change those roles depending on the project and the amount of time we have. If we have no time on a project, our roles are incredibly defined and we do not go outside those lines.
Yeah, it helps us to work faster and and then we essentially produce each other. So I sit down, it's like, quick, do some strings, and we'll start and I play some strings, and then it's like, okay, this needs some percussion. Wendy, percussion, and she'll do that, and it gets put together pretty quickly.
Yep.
You've both been really successful in an unconventional profession. How much of that success do you attribute to luck, and how much of it was hard work?
Well, here's my quote, and I'm sticking to it. Hard work creates luck. Period.
Yeah.
So that's how it's happened for me and Lisa. Just working,
keep working. Yeah, and I think because we grew up around it, we aren't smart enough to leave. It like feels normal to keep struggling in the business and to just be in the business. It's the family business. It's our hometown, factory. It's everything that life is to us. So we just keep doing it. And Wendy's right. Hard work creates luck, and you need to develop relationships with people. You need to have a reputation. You need to really develop your skills. And so you just have to keep doing it all the time. And that's what's made us successful. You just look up one day and realize you've done all these things, and you say, well, I guess that's success because I'm working.
Yeah, exactly.
What does an average workday look like for you today? I know you said you're kind of back in the studio now.
Yeah.
An average workday, we try and get through at least 2 reels of a show a day. We get handed pretty hefty minutes on our programs. They rely heavily on Lisa and I, compose. We're also in only episode 3 of the new show that we're composing for Amazon. And so we're still developing our themes. So it's depending on evening schedules. I'm a single mom, so I'm home a lot when I have my son with me, to be a mom. So we work, from at least, 10:30, 11 o'clock to straight through 8 o'clock. And we don't take any breaks. So, we don't stop to have long cocktail hour lunches. We just try and get as much work done as can. Yeah. Would you like that? Yes. So, we're full on. And then, we don't pull all-nighters anymore. I refuse to do that. It's not good for your health. That stopped maybe about 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. I refuse to do all-nighters. I refuse it. It's just, it's part of the things that I won't bend. So if someone needs something delivered, I'd rather go in early in the morning and stay all day until, 10 at night, but I won't watch the sunrise and compose.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to anyone, I guess especially women who want to build a career in film or television music?
Well, again, it's kind of like you just don't stop. It is important to develop relationships and meet people. So you really have to work the room, so to speak. And it's a whole community.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. Lisa's correct. I would also add that for any, at least females that are trying to get into this, I think studying the craft is important to do. Learn what you're doing. And you got to really, really love storytelling. And have a specific kind of take on things. I do think it's also a good idea to develop your skill by taking films that you love and loading them into your computer and turning dialogue or turning off, all the dialogue and music. Let's just say, just mute it and compose to one of your favorite scenes, and learn how to orchestrate and learn what instruments sound good together to you specifically. Develop your sound. It's also, there's, in TV, it's a different world because you have to work so fast. Get used to working really fast and get your sounds together and learn how to do it. And it's difficult. It's a difficult road to go on. And I dare say that if I were first starting out right now as a young composer, it would be a daunting task. And I only thank God that I've been at this so many years now that I don't have to even think like that. But I suppose the best advice to give is just you want to do it, just do it. Just do it. Find your find it.
And you have to really be able to let go of your music too. You have to, it's easy to get your ego wrapped up into every note you play, but you really have to be able to let go of it and know that you have more where that came from.
Absolutely.
Because especially when you start collaborating with people and working on films and working on TV, you're going to have people picking apart your work, and you have to be able to be okay with that and be like, yeah, okay, that trombone doesn't work. You don't like the trombone? I won't use the trombone, don't get all wrapped
Lisa's
up.
Right.
And, you can't put your whole being and soul into the trombone. So,
right.
Just
to add to that, I would say that when you do get a great collaboration, like with the show we're working on right now, there's like a huge committee of people that are throwing notes at us. But you know what? The notes are great because there's a couple of really, obviously you can tell, musicians on the production team that are giving notes, and they're really good notes. So, bring it on. Bring it on, bring the notes on, bring the collaboration on, be really open to, it's not our medium. It's not the composer's medium. It's the show. It's the story's medium. So we're there to service it. So you don't think that your music is going to make or break the show, because it's not. It's just simply not. You're lucky if it does, and that's great. But it's the story that's going to make or break it.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. It was really great to talk to you.
Thanks, Nick.
Oh, a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Music Dialogue. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe and leave a review wherever you download podcasts. The opening and end music used in this episode was composed by William Ryan Fritsch. You can hear more of his music at williamryanfritsch.com. Follow us on Instagram at Music Dialogue. We'll see you next time.